welcome back to the Max Sports Connection podcast, all Maction all the time. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Today, I've got another special guest. I don't know if I want to call him a guest because he's a good friend, but we'll call him a special guest anyway. This week, I've got Micah Beutell joining me, who did me a solid with some bowl game coverage. Micah, thank you so much for coming onto the show this week. Talk about your bowl game experience. Looking forward to speaking to you.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine. I've been listening for a while now, so to finally be on the show, I'm a little salty that technically I can never say it right. Brigadier Bronco got to be the first one, but I guess sometimes they save the second for best, right?
That's exactly what it was.
But no, it's a pleasure to be on, and really excited to talk about our experiences as fans as bowl games this year, and obviously just cover what is the Arizona Bowl.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, let's just get right into it. Saturday, December 23rd, you did quite a day. You hit two MAC bowl games. You started with the Camellia Bowl between Northern Illinois, Arkansas State, and then you traveled, 2.5 hours for the Eastern Michigan, South Alabama 68 Ventures Bowl?
Yeah, 2.5 is what it was. So, well, 3 hours if you want to factor the 30 minutes from when you pull onto campus to get to your parking spot, but 2.5 hours of actual traveling time.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I'll kind of let you take this. Talk about that experience. We'll start with the Camellia Bowl. Obviously, Northern Illinois wins this one against Arkansas State. Arkansas State 21-19. Some people, we'll just talk about the questionable call there at the end. Were concerned that the officials had too much of a hand in deciding the outcome of that game. But what was your initial thought on that?
He was offsides.
Okay.
Anyone that says he wasn't, I mean, I get the whole ticky-tacky, because what it was. So I don't know if you saw the video that I posted, Alex. I'm sure you probably did on on the page for you all. You can see that his head is leaning over the line. And to this day, I'm still so mad. So the way the Crampton Bowl, not the Camellia Bowl, the Crampton Bowl stadium is set up, you can stand and kind of follow the pace of play on that home side.
Mm-hmm.
And I debated whether I should stand on the line where they're kicking off or the line that they had to get. I chose the line that you had to get, which looking back on it now kind of stinks because I would have had a better angle of the offsides if I would have gone from the kicking side. But you can see that his head is leaning across the line. And I understand that's ticky-tacky. I understand that, that stinks, but the rules are the rules. And at the end of the day, if you are past the line of scrimmage before the ball is kicked, I don't care if it's your face mask, I don't care if it's your hands, you're across the line of scrimmage. That's the definition of offsides in football. So it's the offsides on a kickoff. I mean, because at the end of the day, how would you feel if you're a Northern Illinois fan seeing my angle and going, wow, they didn't call offsides on that?
Sure.
So, that was obviously tough for Arkansas State, and I don't blame them for being upset. I mean, I also hear the argument, well, NIU should have just recovered it, and I also agree with that. Like, you can't not catch the ball there. That's a real tough look for them. But, I mean, he was offsides, in my opinion. And at the end of the day, I mean, I always say ball doesn't lie. Well, second kick was pretty clearly recovered by NIU, so ball doesn't lie.
Fair enough. Well, let's kind of run back to the top of this game. You saw a little bit of everything in this one. I mean, this one got a little bit chippy. This one had play fakes where we saw a kicker run for a touchdown. This one just seemed to have a little bit of everything. Kind of talk about your experience and the bowl as a whole.
Yeah, so on the game side, I mean, I want to give huge credit to Coach Hammock and that staff for choosing to just stick to a game plan of being aggressive. Not once, but twice they fail on aggressive play calling. And you'd think, okay, they're going to put that away. Mm-hmm. No, they continue to do it throughout the game. And it was the difference in the game. I mean, I'm not saying that Arkansas State wasn't aggressive or didn't deserve to, wasn't, the better team here, but it felt like NIU knew that they had to be aggressive in this game to win. Because Arkansas State, I mean, I'm just going to be honest, the better quarterback, in my opinion, in this game was for the Red Wolves. I mean, I think Rayner is a fantastic quarterback. I mean, it's not the slight Rocky Lombardi, but, Arkansas State had a lot more from a building standpoint with this game with how young that team is than maybe NIU did, where NIU obviously had some more senior leadership on the roster. So I love the decision to be aggressive because, again, NIU hasn't won a bowl game in a really long time. Was it 2011 before
Like that.
this?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
So, I know it's before I was graduated high school, and I'm almost 10 years removed from that now. So, I know it's been a while. So, it's great to see that type of aggressive play calling and then not back down from it. Because sometimes you see, you fail it once and then you just shy away from it. No, it was continually the whole game. They went for it, and I respect them for it. And similar to what they did with, even that final drive to seal it. I mean, they didn't just do a normal halfback draw. I mean, they pulled the linemen and they said, we're getting the first down. So that way Arkansas State has no ability to stop us. We're going to end this game. They're not getting the ball back. And, and I respected that play calling throughout the whole game. Again, it kind of backfired right before halftime there when Arkansas State scored right before the half because of a turnover. But, that's the ebbs and flows of the game. So thought that was an incredible game plan from NIU. But from the standpoint of the bowl game, so I went to this bowl game last year, Alex, and I don't know how many Buffalo fans may have complained about it. Not because they didn't travel at the level of Georgia Southern, but they didn't travel at the level of Georgia Southern for that one. But if you ask any Georgia Southern fan that went to Montgomery, I mean, there were literally stores that were making apparel saying, "We survived Montgomery," because that's how bad that bowl game was. I mean, it was atrocious. If I'm just being honest, like, even I was treated pretty poorly. So they had listed on their website free parking right outside the stadium. Like, literally, it was on the website. It was in the email they sent to people that had tickets. Like, hey, know before you go, this is where you can park for free. So we all show up, and they're requiring $20 to park, and it's only cash. And like in the modern world, who carries cash nowadays, right? Like most stadiums don't even take cash. So, and they're basically saying you either pay or you got to turn around and leave. And it's like, it's 11 a.m., in the morning, right? Like for kickoff. So you're getting there 8:30.
Right.
You don't want to deal with that first thing in the morning. So they did
rough.
The bowl game did a lot better job of, they actually had security. Last year, you could leave the stadium to go to the other side. Like you had to actually leave the stadium. Where this year, the end zone area, the way that stadium is set up, you do leave the stadium technically, but they do what most of these schools do when you have that type of setup, to where you leave the stadium, but they still enclose it with security. So they had food trucks this year. So they actually had the ability to get food. My favorite bowl game story, Alex, was last year at the Camellia Bowl, where at halftime, me and my buddy, we saw how long the concession lines were. And we're like, well, we can leave the stadium. And we're like, there's a Wendy's 0.2 of a mile up the road. So we walked to Wendy's and got a 4 for $4, ate it at Wendy's, and got back in time for kickoff.
That's amazing.
It was one of the more this shouldn't be happening, but oh well, kind of thing. So I joked you didn't have to have a ticket to the game. Like if you showed up at kickoff, you could have said, "Oh, my ticket's already been scanned," and they just would have let you in. So, it was a disaster last year. They did a much better job this year, which also prefaces too. I mean, Arkansas State didn't travel as well as Georgia Southern did, but I mean, I was impressed in both situations. We'll get to the 68 Ventures Bowl, but Northern Illinois showed up a lot more than I thought they would. I'm not trying to slander that fan base because that's not my attempt, but that's not a very convenient drive. We're talking 2 days before Christmas. We're talking 11 a.m. kickoff. Nothing. I mean, and just to be honest, of the destinations of bowl games for the MAC, I mean, I would argue it might be the worst destination. I mean, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but Montgomery, Alabama is not super convenient to get to. You got to fly to Birmingham to get there, or Atlanta if you want to rent a car and drive a little bit more distance to get a cheaper flight. But it's not super convenient. There's a lot of history in Montgomery, but it's not really a tourist city, right? Sure. And that stadium it's old. I mean, that's just plain and simple. It's old. There's nothing if you put that in the tier of ranking the MAC stadiums, I don't know. I think the closest thing to it that might be as bad, it's not to slander Dick Stadium, but Everyone calls it a glorified high school field. That's kind of what it is. It's just a glorified high school field over there in
Okay.
Montgomery. It's just old. So it's not a great, attractive experience for many people. Again, I thought they did a great job of this year of making it a lot more fan friendly. But, too, if you're an NIU fan, when the bowl game got announced, Alex, if you go to the Camellia Bowl's like official announcement and you go to the comments underneath it, it's literally Georgia Southern fans saying, "Don't go, don't go. Hope it's better
Yeah,
than
I
last year.
remember
Don't
seeing
go,
that.
don't go." Like, I know for a fact if I was an NIU fan, that'd probably scare me off. If you're telling me I gotta, travel right before Christmas
Sure.
and
Sure.
probably not a very cheap, convenient trip. So
Sure.
very impressed with the NIU turnout. Um, and I mean, I went to 3 bowl games this year. Unfortunately, nothing's going to top the famous Toastery Bowl, but that was for different reasons.
Sure.
That was just an incredible, incredible job. Like NIU was involved, fan base was involved the whole game. And, just from the game standpoint, I think my favorite part was you got a little bit of two, I mean, it was a tale of 2 halves. You have
Yeah.
a first half that, I'm posting videos on the page for you, Alex, that it's like these NIU cheerleaders are going to be jacked by the time this game's over at this
Mm-hmm.
rate. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the last time they did those push-ups all game.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
the defense had to stand tall in the second half, and they did exactly that. And I mean, I still think the NIU probably could have scored on that last possession if they wanted to, but obviously, why would you? So it was overall fantastic game, and again coming up large, that 2-point conversion stop to end the game, because when Arkansas State scored that, I'm standing right on NIU's sideline, and you didn't see anything change from that team, and I thought that was super impressive because I know for me and the way the Arkansas State faithful reacted on the other side, it was kind of like, oh shoot, this game's going to overtime.
Sure.
And
Sure.
no, everything about that sideline was like, cool, you scored a touchdown, you still got to score here, and they stood tall. So that was
Right.
really awesome to see.
Well, that's awesome. Let's flip over to 68 Ventures Bowl. Obviously, the narrative after the Camellia Bowl started to change, like, hey, maybe the MAC isn't the conference that looks the worst. And then the 68 Ventures Bowl happened. South Alabama took it to Eastern Michigan 59-10. And really it wasn't even that close. Just well, I sat here at home watching this one. And you obviously were there. The highlight really came after the game, the unfortunate highlight. But let's just dive into this one real quick. We'll blow through the recap on this because of course not much in terms of things for Eastern Michigan here. But yeah, go ahead and talk about your experience down there.
I'm going to keep this family friendly on my opinion, but I thought it was complete BS, the pairing. I mean, that was pathetic. Like, we're in a world, Alex, where what do we get told? It's all about TV ratings. It's all about, what's the best, most sexy matchup we can have. And
Mhm.
that's what they came up with. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to slander Eastern Michigan, but let's be real. They were probably the most fraudulent bowl team in the MAC. I mean, they were 0-2 against their in-state rivals. They benefited from a pretty decent non-conference schedule. Like, I mean, if you had to power rank the bowl teams, Alex, again, I don't want to speak for you, but I know for myself, Eastern Michigan would have been at the bottom. And I would argue that I would have rather seen, like, in terms of quality of team, Central Michigan, who obviously missed the bowl game,
Sure.
and was 4-8 or 5-7. But,
5-7 that year,
I just didn't like the pairing to begin with. I mean, selfishly, I was so glad South Alabama was at home because I could count it towards my journey of trying to go to every FBS stadium. And at the end of the day, the end zone still said South Alabama. The band was still there. And I'm just going to be frank, they made it a South Alabama home game. And I don't
Sure.
mean just like how the fans were, because obviously it was a South Alabama pro crowd, but I mean, they did light shows only when South Alabama scored. They did, the entrance was South Alabama's entrance with light shows. Eastern Michigan didn't get a light show. They got their video and their, obviously the factory bricks, but it just was I mean, the parking was set up obviously the same way as South Alabama. The tickets were being sold by South Alabama. The only difference for South Alabama was what sideline they used. And from what I understand, I'm pretty sure they even still use their home locker room.
So
So
it's I kind of want to talk on that for a quick second. I am not opposed to Southern universities getting to host bowl games. In fact, I think that's a great opportunity, and I fully support it. I do, however, believe nobody should be allowed to be a participant in their own home stadium as a bowl for a bowl game. You talk about the pairing, whatever. Um, for me, South Alabama getting to host and then also participate in the game that they were hosting, even as the quote unquote away team. I mean, that to me just feels wrong as a football fan. And some people say, "Oh, well, they deserved it. They earned it." And it's like, no, they didn't earn it. They're a Southern program who just happens to have a college football stadium to host a bowl game. So that's really kind of my biggest gripe from this situation. I know you talked about the matchup and everything, but for me, like Eastern Michigan, even if they made this a game, to me it didn't feel like they were going to have an opportunity just because they were so far from home that this was a true home game for South Alabama, despite being the visitors.
I mean, to be honest, I think it should have been switched. I should have been watching Northern Illinois and Arkansas State and Mobile, and I should have been watching South Alabama and Eastern Michigan and Montgomery.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you to a point. I have no problem, because obviously I'm sure you're aware, Alex, it's all a selection thing. There's a
Yep.
priority order of who gets to pick what, when, and where, why, and how. I don't have a problem if 6-6 South Alabama is at the bottom of the pile and the 68 Ventures Bowl has to pick between South Alabama and we'll just say Georgia Southern, right? Those
Sure.
are your two options at 6-6. Like, fine. But the Sun Belt had what, 5, 6 teams at 6-6? You can't
Yeah,
tell me
they
that
had a
they couldn't
lot.
have pulled. You can't tell me they couldn't have pulled somebody else to put in Mobile.
They
Like,
had seven
again,
teams at 6-6.
and we've seen this before. I mean, Alex, my first ever bowl game as a Virginia fan was back in 2016 or 17 in the Military Bowl, and we played Navy, a 10-2 Navy team. We were 6-6. Like, another pairing that's just not very fair. Like, we kind of saw it today in the Military Bowl, Alex. Like,
Hmm.
it wasn't obviously a home game for Virginia Tech, but they got put in a very regionally friendly game, right? Like, to be the closest game, maybe minus Charlotte, they could have been placed in. But again, they were 6-6 going against 11-2. I don't
Right.
necessarily have like if South Alabama was 6-6 and we would have given them Toledo, right, our MAC runner-up, or Miami of Ohio, our MAC champion, like, fine, because at least the home field advantage is almost negated, by the fact that we have a team that's arguably one of our best. I mean,
Sure.
South Alabama, like, it's so funny because, again, I'm very mad at the college football playoff committee still about what they did at Florida State. Like, South Alabama beat Oklahoma State by like 30 points, who is considered a quality win for Texas in that Big 12 championship game.
Hmm.
And we're pairing them with Eastern Michigan in a home game.
Yeah.
It just wasn't like, again, I don't want to. I want to be clear. The South Alabama staff that worked it did their very best to make it neutral. They brought in a separate DJ from the ones that do their home games. They did Eastern Michigan's third down song like they always do. They did so it was they did their very best. They even brought Eastern Michigan's like they got basically their entire marketing team to provide them kickoff songs and all that stuff, right? So
Hmm.
they did their best, like audio and obviously visual is completely neutral with
Right.
just 68 Ventures logos and stuff. So they did their best. People that complained about the end zones, I don't think any team should have to rip up their end zones for a bowl game. Like, it's inconvenient that it says South Alabama and the end zones on both sides, but oh well. Like, it is what it
Sure.
is. I
Sure.
mean, the scoreboard's got a giant jaguar on it, so I'd be more concerned about that if you asked me than the end zones. But
That's
you
fair.
know, it just was from the start. I mean, I changed into my Eastern Michigan hat, and it was so strange because it was just like people were looking at me like, wait, there's an Eastern Michigan fan here. And I want to be
Hmm.
very clear. I was very impressed with the amount of green that was there. Eastern
Yeah.
Michigan showed up. Now, I would say probably 60% of it was parents, but they showed out. I mean, it was like, considering what it was, I was very impressed. And I don't want to be negative towards South Alabama. That stadium was probably only 80% full, Alex. For a team seeking their first ever bowl win at home before Christmas, like, I feel like it's easier to attend a bowl game before Christmas than after. I might be speaking for myself, but I would argue after, like, when you have that weird week between the holidays, it's a lot harder to travel than it is right before.
So you mentioned the 80%. According to ESPN, it was about 82%. So you aren't far
Oh
off.
wow.
About almost 21,000 people in attendance. Their capacity is
Yeah.
25,500. So you were pretty close on that.
And even then, like you could argue it was maybe even less than that actually was in the seats at any given time.
Sure.
But I know how it works. People are on the concourse, people are,
Hmm.
there's standing room spots that you maybe not sitting in your seats, but you're counting towards the number, obviously. But it was just like I had such high hopes, especially coming after the Camellia Bowl, right? I was like, man, South, like, and especially too when I'm stuck in traffic, taking me 30 minutes to get to my parking spot, which I was spoiled thanks to you being media. I was literally parked right outside the stadium. It took me 20 steps to get to the media gate. It was awesome.
Right.
But to get to my spot took 25 to 30 minutes. I'm like if you ever played the NCAA game where it's, Chris Fowler, yeah, Fowler going, uh, and there's a giant traffic jam on interstate, yada yada yada. As fans are planning to pile in, to insert
Yeah.
stadium here.
Yeah.
Like that's what it felt like. I was like, holy crap! Like this is awesome. Like you see people walking from their parking spots, like in the free lots across campus. Like
Right.
you're like, this is gonna be like, there's going to be an atmosphere, and there was, but not like what I had hoped to see. And they're like, well, students are gone, and I'm like, I get that, but I mean, like you're a student, how do you not come? Like if the student fan base is like the difference, right? Like, oh, they would have been here if they were here. Like, how do you not come back? Like, I mean, your
Hmm.
team was like, I was talking to a couple of South Alabama fans early in the first quarter, and they're like, yeah, we drove 4 hours for this. And I'm like, okay, like that's really cool. And like the guy literally says, only reason why I was determined to come was I knew we were going to get our first bowl win tonight. And I didn't blame them. Like they were 17 and a half, 17 and a half point favorites going into the
Yeah.
day. Like, if I was a fan of that team, you get to play in your home stadium, a place you're familiar, and you're more than likely going to win the football game. Why would you not be excited about that?
Sure.
So, yeah, it was from the very get go. I mean, Eastern Michigan was in trouble. And, obviously, South Alabama punches them right in the mouth to start with that field goal. And then, I think it was a quick turnover. I think it's what it
Yeah.
was, or not. It was a
It got
three
out
and
of
out.
hand really
But
early in that one.
yeah, I mean, I was with Mike's CFB campus tour the whole game. And it was so funny because I pointed out to him, like, look at the scoreboard. This is in the fourth quarter. I'm like, they only have 70 something yards of total offense.
Yeah.
He's like, I gotta go get a picture of that. Cause like, think about the amount of games that Mike has been to. I mean, I've been to a
Right.
lot. I've never seen anything like that. I
Sure.
mean,
Sure.
they couldn't do a lick. And I know obviously they were down to their backup, and you know, South Alabama is probably the best 6-6 group of five team in college football. Like, sorry not to badmouth any 6-6 MAC teams, but I mean, if South Alabama doesn't kind of crap on themselves a couple times in conference play, they're probably 9-3. And they were
Sure.
midway. They were in late October potentially going to win the Sun Belt West. Like if they beat Troy, they're going to be in the Sun Belt championship game. So,
Hmm.
this was a team that was much better than their record. It just, I felt bad for. There were a couple Eastern Michigan fans. I remember one's name was Brad. So Brad, if you're listening, I told you to check this podcast out. Shout out to you. He's like, yeah, he goes to every Eastern Michigan bowl game. He reminds me of, I can never get his name right, Vanzi on Twitter, but like he's
Mm.
so pro EMU. Like he's like, yeah, I haven't missed a bowl game since, I guess, since Creighton's really started this run. And I was
Right.
like, wow, that's really impressive. And he's like, yeah, this was the hardest one to convince myself to go to because we've had bad experiences here in Mobile from like how the game has gone. Plus,
Yep.
he knew it was going to be a road game for them. He knew they were probably going to get beat. But again, it was a shame because I was really hoping there was like we were going to get at least a quality game for a quarter or two, but we didn't even get that.
Sure. Well, and I don't want to sit too long on this one because again, not really too many highlights to come from this game. But obviously the dramatics after the fact, of course, don't help Eastern Michigan. It looks like there was an apology issued by EMU and by the player in question. And again, I really don't want to talk on that because I don't want to continue to bring attention to that as well.
Yeah.
But it looks like, just a bad experience for Eastern Michigan this time out. And obviously Chris Creighton's gotta sit down, look at the drawing board and say, all right, what do we got to do next year? So hopefully Eastern Michigan can bounce back. They're a program who's been on the rise in the MAC, looking to move forward. Speaking of other programs moving forward and on the rise in the Mid-American Conference, let's briefly touch on this Bowling Green game. We've got about 10 minutes left here. Touch on this Bowling Green game, and then we'll dive into Toledo taking on Wyoming in the Arizona or the Barstool Arizona Bowl. But this Bowling Green Minnesota game, I had my hopes up for Bowling Green. I thought, hey, good opportunity to get this bowl win. Darius Taylor destroyed the Bowling Green defensive line. He had a rushing career high of 208 yards, and Minnesota still only escaped with a 6-point victory. I was not that impressed with Bowling Green's defense. I was okay with their offense. They moved the ball decently, specifically in the second half. The first half, not so hot. They actually had more yards than Minnesota did on the game. But Minnesota just looked so good in this game for a team who really, record-wise, didn't deserve to be in a bowl game. They were sitting at 5-7. They end up winning this. They're 6-7 to finish the year. But Bowling Green has come a long way since the Mike Jinks era, and I know there are Bowling Green fans who will disagree with me and say, "Oh, this was terrible." Mike Jinks was 6 years ago. Bowling Green
Mhm.
was 2-10, 3-9. They were awful. And now Bowling Green's finally getting back to bowl games. Scott Leffler has done a fantastic job of rebuilding this program and really rebuilding it from the ground up from a spot where they were not good. A spot that they just I want to say they were 0-5 during the pandemic year. Like this is a program who just bottomed out entirely from the Mike Jinks era. Scott Leffler has worked tirelessly to rebuild this, and it's been really, really awesome to see. Um, so hats off to Minnesota. Not too much to really take from this. Bowling Green's returning some key starters next year, looking to be competitive, of course, in the Mid American Conference. Um, we have one bowl game left. Unfortunately, the MAC is sitting at 2-3, looking like they're not going to repeat as the Bowl Challenge champions, which that's okay. They've won it twice now. Um, but let's get into this last one here. Like I said, just a few minutes left here. But we've got Toledo taking on Wyoming out at the Barstool Arizona Bowl. What are your initial thoughts?
I'm sorry to you, Alex. I know you're a Toledo guy, and I know there's probably some Toledo people listening. In my bowl pick'em, my confidence of Wyoming winning is 39.
Okay,
Um, I don't like Toledo in this spot, and that's not a slander to what Jason Candle has and this team has accomplished this year. But
sure.
we were talking obviously off the show. I mean, we're talking offensive players of the year all over the field for first team all MAC guys. Obviously not suiting up for Toledo in this one or in the portal. And I'm sure you know this, Alex, and hopefully our listeners do as well. But this is Craig Bowles' last game as Wyoming's
Yeah.
head football coach, a
Mm-hmm.
very legendary coach who, I mean, I've met the man. I was interviewed actually for a job outside of college or when I graduated at Wyoming, got to meet him. He is so respected by everyone in that athletic department, in that community, and by his players. I just, Toledo, the regular season Toledo is better than the regular season Wyoming. But I don't think with what's not playing for Toledo and just what it is for Wyoming, and people have to remember too, Wyoming last year in the Barstool Bowl against Ohio, you know, the fan that was a very pro Wyoming crowd. I expect something similar again, especially with it being Craig Bowles' last game.
Sure.
They're familiar with it. I mean, they actively chose to be in this game again. Like people don't necessarily know that, but there's a lot of schools that won't play in the bowl game due to the sponsorship, which everyone's entitled to their own opinion with that. Wyoming was so for it because it's on national television now with it being on the CW this year and not just
Yeah.
hit it on barstoolsports.com. This is a great chance for Toledo and the MAC to really send a statement on national television, but I just think that there's just too much working against Toledo in this one.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Toledo not having, of course, MAC player or MAC MVP this year, DeQuan Finn. He's committed to Baylor, so he will not be playing for the Rockets in this bowl game. And then Penny Boone just officially announced that he is in the transfer portal. Um, this is this is big for this Toledo offense. Penny Boone obviously winning the MAC Offensive Player of the Year. His 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns are going to be a big loss for this team. To that point, though, Tucker Gleason came in last year and won a few games for Toledo while DeQuan Finn was injured. And so Tucker Gleason has a lot of familiarity with this offense. He's comfortable with this offense. He understands these players. He does get Jacquez Stewart in his backfield. He does get Jawan Newton receiving the ball. And he's got Anthony Torres, the tight end who transferred from Western Michigan, who has had, a breakout, especially in the second half of this year. He does get those tools to kind of utilize and to kind of move forward. But it'll be really interesting to see. I like Toledo's defense. Peasley is not going to try to pick on Quinyon Mitchell too much, the two-time All-American for Toledo. But it's going to be really interesting to see, I think the Toledo defense matches up really well against this Wyoming offense. It's going to come down to what this Toledo offense, what wrinkles they can kind of put into the game to counter this Wyoming defense. And I think this is going to be a good one. I think that the line being at 3 is a really good line. That spread is going to be a really it's the right spread. I think that this is going to be an evenly contested game. This is going to be a game that it's going to come down to probably the final possession.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think it's first to 20 wins. I really do. I think this game's going to be, the big joke is it's a Big Ten West type game. This will be a Big Ten West kind of game.
Yep. No, I completely agree with you. And yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. I'm excited for this one. Obviously want the MAC to do well, try to win this one and finish bowl season 500, 6 teams playing in bowl games. Getting back to 500 in bowl season would look really, really good for the conference and kind of help to put to rest a little bit some of that discussion of the MAC's the worst FBS conference. We'll see. Last year they won the Bowl Challenge Cup. They got a few quality wins this year, looking to try to do the same. And yeah, so we'll see. I'm excited for this one. That game is at 4:30 Eastern time on the CW, like you mentioned, or over on the Barstool website on December 30th. So that'll be Saturday. And then we're done. And then we're done with MAC bowl games. Hard to believe that that's happening.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's that quick. And as I'm not on the show very often, I just want to make it very clear the MAC is not the worst FBS conference. If anyone wants to come debate me, I was at the CUSA title. I will gladly have this debate with anybody.
Well, cool. Micah, as we wrap this up, give me a kind of quick under a minute, just tell people kind of what you do, what's going on and where they can follow you on social media.
Yeah, so you can follow me on all my social media, Beutell25. You've probably seen some sort of core tweet. Or Alex, thank you for all the shout outs you've given me on the podcast site. So feel free to follow me on there. I'd like to think I'm a fun college football follow. I'm trying to go to every FBS stadium. I've been to 84 of them for games. So we're chugging along. I am the director of marketing for an FCS school in East Tennessee State for athletics. So, you'll see some ETSU stuff on there too. But grew up an Akron fan, grew up in Northeast Ohio. My first ever sporting event was an Akron Marshall game where Marshall blew a 28-0 lead on a Friday night on ESPN to lose to Akron 31-28 when it was 6 degrees. So that was my first. That's what sparked my love for college football. So, the MAC is really what made me who I am, I guess, in that sense, which is the sicko that loves college football so much. But yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. If you follow me, obviously I'm pretty good about following back unless you're like a bot account. So as long as you look like a bot account, I'll follow you back.
Awesome. And guys, again, a big shout out to Micah for all of his efforts and work covering some of these bowl games. We decided to collab and figure out how can we do this? How can we make this work? And again, Micah, thank you for all you did. I'm truly appreciative, and means the world to me that you stepped in and helped out.
My pleasure. And remember, Arkansas State fans that are listening, you were offside.
Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. made a few changes, logo changes, a slight name change. I'm sure you heard at the top of the show. You can still find me on social media at the MSC podcast, and that's going to be all the handles now. It's not just one handle for this, one handle for that. That's going to be Instagram, Twitter X, Facebook, the MSC podcast. I think it's cleaner, going to help me to continue to deliver Mac content and get it out to more people. So really looking forward to the future and what I've got coming up. But thank you guys so very much for tuning in. We will be checking in with you again next week, post the Toledo-Wyoming game in the Barstool Arizona Bowl. Looking forward to that one. But until then, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.